Hello, everyone. I am Rachel Lang, the Outreach Director for NCGR, and I'm here with Ramya today. Ramya is a practitioner of Western and Vedic astrology, and she's here today to talk a little bit about the subject for the talk that she's giving at the New England Astrology Conference, which is Karmic Remedies for Western and Vedic Astrologers. So welcome, Ramya.
Thank you, Rachel. Happy to be here.
So good to have you. So I'm fascinated by this subject because within it you talk about number one, how to identify some of those karmic patterns in a chart or in astrology, and then number two, how to mediate those, or how to look at other ways of healing those. So I thought, first of all, can you tell us a little bit about this topic and how you came to it?
Sure. So, I come from the Hindu philosophy here, or I guess you could say Eastern philosophy mostly, right? So there's two concepts. One is karma, the other is dharma. So I think the two sometimes they get mixed up a little bit. So I figured, you know what, for an astrology perspective here, let me talk about karma and dharma, how they interact. So provide a little bit of the basis or the foundation for the Eastern philosophy. And from there, go into, well, how does this play out in astrology? And then, which also plays into the whole, like the destiny and the free will, right? So if it's karma and it's bound to happen, then that's destiny. And is there such a thing as flexible karma? And the answer is yes, there is. And so I talk a little bit about that. And so the flexibility of the karma, like how do you see that in a chart? And then based on that, what are some of the remedies? So in Vedic astrology, it's, I grew up in India, and you go to a Vedic astrologer and you don't spend a lot of time having like a big discussion with them. You just say, hey, this is my problem. How do I fix it? So they look at it and they identify the planet that's the cause for it. Like right now, I have a problem going on with my eye, and the problem has to do with me running the sun Antardasha, or the sub period of the sun, which rules the eye. And so I know automatically that the remedy is going to involve something to do with the sun. And so there's a bunch of remedies. And then depending upon what the astrologer, sometimes they feel it out and they say, hey, I think you should do the Aditya Hridayam for the sun. So it could be a mantra. It could be like some kind of a seva or a donation, or working off your karma some way. It can be Vastu, which is like Feng Shui. It can be color therapy. It can be gemstone therapy. So there's a bunch of different alternatives. And then sometimes, depending upon how fixed or flexible your karma is, you may go, want to go with something like that. But I figured could be a very practical use of karmic remedies for whether you're a Western astrologer or a Vedic astrologer. Once you know this is the planet that's causing the issues, then you narrow down on the remedies and you figure out which one you want to prescribe.
That's great. When you're looking at, so when in your approach to this, are you actually, or when you're working on this with clients or with in your practice, do you first identify the challenges going on in the chart? Like, do you look at transits? Do you look at progressions? Or are you working with a client and listening to their symptoms? Like, which way do you approach getting that karmic information?
So I would definitely look at the transits, progressions. I would look at the planetary periods, or the dashas. So similar to what you do with Hellenistic astrology, the actual periods and who was the ruler of that period. So these things would give me a clue as to what area of life is being impacted for this person. And then also, like, a hard transit. So I just mentioned this whole thing with I identified the sun because I saw that in my planetary sub period. But it could just as well be a hard transit that's happening. And then that leads me to, oh, this is the planet that's causing the issues, A lot of the times the culprit is Saturn, but or astrologers like to blame Saturn. So I spend actually extra time on Saturn when I go through this presentation. But then you also listen to what the person has to say, and then you say, oh, Like so I'll give you an example. So let's say I looked at it and said, oh, it's sun related stuff going on for you because of this. And I say, oh, well, I've been having an eye issue. Oh, yeah, that's ruled by the sun. Okay. In Vedic astrology. And then I'm dealing with issues with my father having some medical stuff going on. And the father represents this, the sun represents the father. So, then I can tease out information. What about your father? What's going on with your dad? Oh, yeah, well, he's got this medical procedure that needs to be done. I'm taking him to appointments. Oh, okay. Well, all of that's going to come to an end by end of March, because then that planetary period is over. So until then, do this remedy of the Aditya Hridayam for your eyes, and then do the remedy of, maybe helping out old people or something like that, or donating to prostate cancer or something like that for your dad. So I could come up with different remedies based on that. So that's kind of an example, if that helps.
Yeah. Is that a creative process for you, coming up with different remedies, or are there like templates that you use, like certain remedies that, like, do you have, like, are there ones that are kind of tried and true that you use all the time, or are you kind of going intuitively to come up with different ideas?
I think it's a little intuitive, but I think when it comes to Saturn, for example, which I often end up dealing with, there's things that just draw me immediately, and I'll tell the person right away, oh, you should do the Hanuman Chalisa, if they're, and it depends upon the person too. Like if they are, open to Eastern religions, philosophies, things like that, I might just prescribe mantras or something. If the person is not really open to that, then it might be more of, well, charity, service, that type of thing, or maybe like using a certain color to remind you to harness that energy positively. So those types of things. So it depends on the person as well.
Mhm.
You have to factor that in.
Yeah, so it's kind of like you're creating a ritual to
Yeah.
honor the influence of that, or to honor that planet and honor
Mhm.
that planet's relationship in your life.
Yeah, in a positive way.
Hmm. Hmm. Do you, in your work, uh, do you blend Vedic and Western astrology? Like, do you work with both of them? And if so,
Absolutely.
how do you do that?
Oh, absolutely. I use them both all the time because the Western astrology gives me like, I do like using the transits of the Western astrology because I look at the orbs, which Vedic astrology doesn't always look at. So it's not really known too much for that, whereas I use the planetary periods in the Vedic astrology. So I follow all the Western astrology rules for Western astrology. I follow all the Vedic astrology rules for Vedic astrology. And when I see confluence in all of them, that indicates a stronger inflexible karma. And so that's sort of like giving you sort of in a nutshell, like how I use the two of them. But the personality really comes out a lot better in the Western astrology because that's not a focus area of Vedic astrology in general. Because I think there's more of a destiny in the Eastern philosophy in the Vedic astrology. So you get more tools to work with in terms of predictions. But then in Western astrology, I think there's more of a free will component because of the Western way of thinking. So you say, well, this will come easy to you. That may be harder for you, but it's not like you can't do it. You can if you try.
Hmm. Do
So
you,
it's something from that perspective.
can we talk a little bit about that flexible karma, flexible destiny? Because
Mm,
I like I like the way that you frame that concept,
mhm.
talking about the combination between fate and free will. Um, can you just maybe talk a little bit about that concept, flexible destiny?
Yeah. So, I mean, the way I would look at it in a chart, right? So there's different, if you look at the philosophy, there's different gradations of karma from very flexible to completely inflexible. So this is the case of, you're the inflexible part would be like, hey, you're in a car, you've got your seatbelt on, you're following all the traffic rules and you stopped at the light, but somebody else hits you. So you were meant to be in an accident. There's nothing you could have done to have prevented that. You did everything right, right? So that's inflexible karma, where that was supposed to, something was supposed to happen. And then the flexible karma is, well, you've got more free will around this. So it's more of how you respond to something. So somewhere between those is where the remedies fit in. So if, let's say I said, in my particular example, like, oh, you're going to have like sun issues happening. right? So, or no, let me take another example. So I knew when I was running my Mars period that typically accidents, issues related to that might come up. So I said, I've always liked martial arts, so I'm going to take on martial arts, and that's a positive way to use that energy. And it just happened, like it was so easy. I got a free. I used to do martial arts before, and then I got into a free program, and then I paid for it subsequently. It was like it was just meant to happen. It happened so easy because there was a positive use of that Mars karma. And sure enough, I did get injured. I tore. This had nothing to do with the my my martial arts, but I ended up having two tears. I have another tear for my. I'm going to take an MRI later this week.
Oh, wow.
For so I have a bunch of injuries happening, which I knew would kind of happen, but I feel like because I voluntarily utilized the Mars energy, I made the karma a bit more flexible than what it might have been.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. It's like you're meeting that planet before it
Yeah, so you
comes.
sort of dissipate the
Yeah,
karma.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you sort of dissipate that energy in other positive ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I mean, I work a lot with this in my own practice. Western
Yeah.
astrology, but looking at like transits and looking at progressions and certain big planetary periods that people are going into or big themes, and saying like, how do you make the most of this? And so it sounds like you're taking that and actually giving people like really practical tools and
Yeah.
practical ways to meet those planetary influences whenever they're coming into play.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
The other Mars example is I started acupuncture
Yeah,
because Mars and needles.
needles. Yeah.
There's more to it, which will be in the presentation, but there's something about needles that I'll talk about there. So again, you're meeting Mars before it causes like an anger issue or a stress issue or something to erupt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, can you give us any Saturn examples, like any good Saturn remedies that you've worked with before? Because I'm sure everyone here listening is like thinking about what, we all could use a Saturn remedy.
Yeah.
So are there any that have worked really well for you in the past?
So if you're into the Eastern philosophies, then I love working with Hanuman Chalisa, or there's a book by Dr. Robert Svoboda called The Greatness of Saturn. So he talks about, it's like an ancient mythology, and the mythology is basically about, the personification of Saturn and how even the most just and wonderful king has to go through the Saturn phase, which is awful. So it's sort of like a healing story where you go, oh, I'm not alone. Everybody else is going through this. And when you read that a couple of times, it's supposed to appease Saturn. And so that's like something that I like and recommend. And it's just like reading a story. So that's one of the easy ones. And there's plenty more that, like I said, I devote more time on Saturn in my presentation than anybody else.
Beautiful. Wow. um, I think anyone listening is going to be really compelled by this topic, and because I think we all wrestle with certain transits, or we're all looking at anyone who knows astrology looks ahead at what's coming, and I think
Yeah,
finding real tangible ways to move through these, to create rituals to help better move through these transits or move through challenging times, I think can be really helpful for anybody.
that's right. And then you feel like, well, at least I'm doing something about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, they feel good, like, oh, well, this is coming up, but you know what? I'm doing something about it. I'm being proactive about it. And half the time, I think that in itself gives you a better feeling, like, well, because I did da da da, even if I have these little issues, they're going to get resolved because I know I already did something to meet that energy halfway. So this is not going to be as big a deal. So
Yeah,
you feel more positive about it.
definitely. Great. Well, so your talk is this weekend at the New England Astrology Conference, and there's still time to sign up. And I think, is there anything you'd like to say about the conference or about the Boston chapter?
Oh, we're super excited to have this because we have a wide geographic dispersed area, and this is the first time we're doing this as an online conference because of COVID. So we hope that all of our regulars and new people will be able to attend and enjoy the wonderful lineup that we have.
Great, excellent. Well, I will post information about that and post your website as well, so that anyone who's watching this, that they can find you and they can find more information about the conference. So thank you so much for this conversation on this topic that I think is going to be of interest and of use to so many people. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Have a great evening.
You too.